Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a great show for you today. It is Monday morning and I'm joined by Niall Stanage. Nice to see you, Niall. I hear you had a long journey over the weekend.
I had an arduous journey during my fatherly duties. I was moving stuff for my daughter from Charlotte to New York City. So that was a 10-hour drive in a moving truck. What more fun could you have on a weekend?
Good man, good man.
How was your weekend?
It was just fine, yeah. Happy summer weekend, enjoying some nice weather. It was intensely hot yesterday, but yeah, good weekend.
Well, we should get down to business, I suppose, Robbie. So what is on your radar?
I suppose we shall. Well, the historic peace summit between President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin took place this weekend in Alaska, with the two nations coming somewhat closer to achieving a lasting peace in Ukraine. Now, those who had hoped this meeting would result in an immediate end to the conflict were left disappointed. However, top U.S. diplomat and negotiator Steve Witkoff said that Putin had agreed the Ukraine would receive a NATO-esque protection guarantee, which would protect Ukraine from further Russian aggression after the war. Now, that's a key component, obviously, of any peace agreement. Ukraine can't simply agree to lose some territory now if it remains the case that Russia will resume the attack later or at some future date. But on the Ukrainian front, it's unfortunately the case that President Zelensky will likely have to agree to territorial concessions in order to bring this conflict to an end. There's a dawning realization among even the most staunchly pro-Ukraine commentators that the war simply will not end unless Ukraine agrees to let Russia keep the conquered territories. The alternative is a drawn-out conflict that kills thousands more Ukrainians and results in the entire country coming under Russian control. The skillful diplomacy of Trump, of Witkoff, and of Secretary of State Marco Rubio is designed to avoid that outcome. Indeed, Rubio's done a terrific job this weekend of schooling the reflexively hawkish voices in the mainstream media who think any public display of respect toward Putin is somehow emboldening him in the Russian takeover of Ukraine. Media pundit after media pundit complained endlessly about Putin receiving the red carpet treatment, riding in a fancy car with Trump, being treated with decency as befits his station as an important world leader. In fact, popular liberal ex-personality Brian Krasenstein called on the U.S. government to assassinate Putin as soon as he set foot in Alaska, which is obviously an insane idea. I don't think I have to point that out. By comparison, the mainstream media was a bit more restrained than that. They were still quite furious that Trump was being nice to Putin. Look, if being mean to Putin was going to work, then Joe Biden would have already succeeded at ending the war. He didn't, because diplomacy is a bit more complicated and subtle than just screaming Putin bad at the top of your lungs over and over again. Rubio made this point expertly during his conversation with ABC's Martha Raddatz. Let's watch.
Critics of President Trump will say the pomp and circumstance, the red carpet, the warm handshake, that President Trump simply lost that Putin gained there just by being on the world stage and walking down a red carpet with the president. Your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, critics of President Trump are always going to find something to criticize. You don't even pay attention to it anymore. But I will tell you this. Putin is already on the world stage. He's already on the world stage. The guy's conducting a full-scale war in Ukraine.
And then here's a bit more from that clip.
He's already on the world stage. When I hear people say that, oh, it elevates him. Well, all we do is talk about Putin all the time. All the media's done is talk about Putin all the time for the last 4 or 5 years. That doesn't mean he's right about the war. That doesn't mean he's justified about the war. Put all that aside. It means you're not going to have a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine. You're not going to end a war between Russia and Ukraine without dealing with Putin.
Rubio has it exactly right. We can't end this war by refusing to give Putin attention or the spotlight or whatever it was Raddatz was complaining about there. Frankly, the argument she's making sounded to me like she was calling for, deplatforming Putin, like she's saying he should be kicked off Twitter or something. We shouldn't be surprised to hear a mainstream media personality, of course, returning to this very familiar well. Liberal and progressive media personalities love the idea of deplatforming people because they have an almost religious faith in censorship and silencing. These are the preferred tactics of the mainstream media folks who imagine that if they can't hear or see people and opinions they don't like, must mean those sinister forces have been defeated or swept aside. You'd think they might have learned by now that this tactic usually backfires, and in any case, Putin is not an account that can be suspended or an idea that can be banned or a phenomenon that can be ignored. Or a military power that can be defeated. He's a political figure who must be engaged with. And lest anyone think the meeting was nothing but pleasantries, President Trump gave Putin a letter from the First Lady, Melania Trump, asking him to end the war for the sake of the children who are suffering because of it. Mr. Putin, she wrote, you can single-handedly restore their melodic laughter. Now let us all hope and pray that this meeting is followed by further diplomacy that ends this horrific conflict. And we'll be talking later in the show about the Zelensky component of all this. But there were a number of media interviews Marco Rubio did over the weekend where he faced basically a version of that question. You know, aren't we like normalizing Putin or something by shaking his hand? I mean, what good would it do to invite him here and be insulting to him? How would that help end the war? So I was very perplexed by that, because this was a media obsession over the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I've a bit of a different view, as I think I do, of the conflict writ large. I mean, I take some of the points you made, and the Brian Krasenstein idea is absolutely nuts. That
World War III on
just have snipers on the rooftops and take him out as soon as he walks off the plane. I mean, that's like a ludicrous idea. Yeah. I think that the situation in Ukraine is genuinely complicated and difficult, because I think perhaps a little bit more than you take the argument that you can't just embolden Putin or have no deterrent to him doing this kind of thing in the future, whether it's in Ukraine or elsewhere in Eastern Europe. To my mind, the Alaska summit was one where Putin accomplished more of his aims or got more of his desires than the United States did, because there was no immediate ceasefire, and whatever about smiling or red carpets or whatever, it did, I think, reduce the isolation of Russia. I don't think it's necessarily about platforming or deplatforming. It's about having this meeting where he is welcomed on equal footing, as if we're just having a kind of casual discussion, rather than a man who has invaded a neighbouring sovereign nation and thus instigated a war that has now lasted more than 3 years.
Yeah, I just don't know that the isolation, though, if I thought isolation was going to bring the war to a close, then I would support, playing hardball to a greater degree. And Trump has countenanced playing hardball to some degree. He's been frustrated with Putin. He's threatened sanctions, but of course previous sanctions have done nothing. A greater form of isolation has not deterred Putin from continuing this conflict. So then I think we have to consider the possibility, and I was very happy to hear Witkoff say that apparently some kind of security guarantee, not NATO, but a security guarantee for the rest of Ukraine is on the table. I mean, that's the best deal they're going to get. Is it not? I can't imagine a more favorable situation for Ukraine than what is still under Ukrainian hands remains Ukraine, and there is an understanding that Russia could not invade again because it is now under the protection of, it's not actually NATO, but under the protection of Europe or us. I don't see that is a good deal, because they're not at risk of further invasion. I can't imagine anything better than that coming about from this.
If it is a deal, if those security guarantees are ironclad and dependable,
right,
the question is really to what extent or with what specificity will those security guarantees be offered? Because as you just alluded to, obviously the nightmare scenario for Ukraine is they make a deal, they concede some kind of territory, and then Russia just comes back in a year, 18 months or 2 years and storms back in again. So that's why it's very important to have these guarantees. Let's see how the meeting today goes, because I think there's going to be a lot of concern and scrutiny as to whether the pendulum swings back to a fairer direction.
And I hope those security guarantees really bring Europe into the picture for being responsible for Ukraine's defense or protection, not getting the U.S. more involved in this region. I don't really think that's something the American people want very much, but we will discuss the Zelensky and Ukrainian component of this in a bit.
We certainly will. Meanwhile, did the State Department just change an international policy based on Laura Loomer? We'll discuss that next. Stay with us.
Trump ally and far-right activist Laura Loomer is taking a victory lap. The United States has announced it's suspending all visitor visas for the Gazans.
The decision comes a day after a furious social media meltdown by Loomer about Palestinian refugees. She writes on X, "There are doctors in other countries. It is a national security risk to import Gazans to the US. We didn't consent to more immigration from Islamic terror hot zones. The Gazans can get medical care in another country."
The State Department, in response, says it will pause the program and reevaluate how the visas are being vetted. They also added that the visas were given to a small number of children in need of medical aid and then their adult guardians. But it seems the decision was not enough for Loomer. The far-right activist took to X, writing, "We need to know who at the State Department issued the visas, and they need to be fired."
Meanwhile, experts and aid groups are urging the US to reverse the decision. The US-based Palestine Children's Relief Fund calling it dangerous and inhumane, which I would agree with. I think it's a pretty absurd and callous policy. I know neither of us are huge Laura Loomer fans, but, I just think these people are in a desperate situation. The organization that she particularly targeted is bringing over children in particularly dire circumstances who cannot, in fact, get that medical care in Gaza, not least because Israel has bombed almost every hospital. And I thought her comments were fairly outrageous.
I am not a fan of Laura Loomer. I certainly don't like government policy via Laura Loomer decree. I did not vote for her. I think the influence she has on the Trump administration is very bad. I was critical of the role she played in ousting Vinay Prasad, who's now been restored to the FDA. I also think, and then on the foreign policy front, she is a voice for very hawkish policies, for confrontation with Iran, for doing work at the behest of Israel, and I see that as part of that project. So I don't like it. In terms of but we should, in fairness to this policy, we should scrutinize it a little bit. I certainly don't object to. I'm not a cruel person. I want suffering, starving, sick children to get medical care. I don't think it is the U.S. government's responsibility to give them care. But if independent aid organizations or doctors want to volunteer to provide them with care, they should be free to do that. I also don't think Gazan children, provide any kind of national security risk to the U.S. The "and their guardians" part maybe does, in fairness, give me the slightest bit of pause for certainly they should be vetted thoroughly, but this is an area overrun by by Hamas, a terrorist group that just attacked. So I would certainly want us to be very, very careful about who is getting admitted to the U.S. from this region. No.
I don't think. The implication there is that if someone comes to Gaza as the parent or guardian of an ailing child, they're automatically under suspicion of being a terrorist, which I think is pretty unpleasant and unjustified.
I'm not saying they're automatically under suspicion, but it is complicated because Hamas is the government of the Gaza Strip, but Hamas is also a terrorist organization that has attacked our ally Israel. We don't want anyone affiliated with, if we put that to a vote of the American people say, no, we don't want anyone affiliated with Hamas in this country. There are even people who are forced, to have a Hamas affiliation in Gaza because they're just the government of the country.
Right. That's another...
And then figuring that out, okay, well, did you just say you're, because you work for the post office and that means you have to be part of Hamas, or are you... But that's at least a little bit complicated.
Well, it is a little bit complicated in the sense that a specific element of Hamas is the armed group, the Al-Qassam brigades. And as you say, because of Hamas's political side, it, runs various agencies. And the suggestion here, which I always think it's a bit of a weasel word when you talk about Hamas-linked groups, because the linkage can be often incredibly loose or vague or opaque when those kind of charges are made. And I think that we don't want to lose track of the central point here, which is, according to the World Health Organization, there are almost 15,000 people in Gaza who need medical treatment that cannot be provided there. If aid groups wish to bring people here for that treatment, and that treatment will be provided for them, I think that should be done. Now, whether, if people are, have some affiliation with the administration in Gaza, I have no problem at all with that. That's completely different from being, a gunman.
You know that I am pretty pro-immigration or open to immigration, at least compared with most other people associated with the right. I'm part of the libertarian right, that I want more high-skilled immigration. I almost completely dismiss the economic arguments that are marshaled against immigration by people on the right. I do feel compelled to take national security considerations of immigration restrictionists, or just the government, at least somewhat seriously. I think the U.S. government has a legitimate role in trying to prevent criminals and terrorists from entering the country. This is a part of the world, and I'm not trying to be cruel. I don't want to stop children from being treated.
Yeah.
But if someone on the restrictionist side says, well, please get them medical aid, but you just can't bring people into this country, do it in, or why can't this be done in Egypt or in Lebanon or somewhere proximate to the country? I mean, why don't they want to help these people?
Well, is it that they don't want to help people, or is it that there's more advanced treatment available in this country? I don't know exactly what the ailments are that these people are suffering from. But to your point about the national security and all of that, I just think there has to be a recognition of the desperate straits in which these people are living. Second of all,
and I certainly oppose the military effort that is putting them in this situation, and I would not have our government contributing to it.
Right. But then the second point is people like Loomer, who, as you rightly say, are very right-wing and hawkish and very pro-Israel on foreign policy, draw the categorizations or the definitions in this extraordinarily loose way, where one of her many tweets was about people waving the Palestinian flag, which she described as displaying their radical values. Now, is it radical to wave the Palestinian flag? I think any nation of people who were under that kind of assault would naturally want to express their national identity. It's not waving an Armalite in the air, it's waving a flag. And so that, I think, speaks to the propensity to smear people, basically, as radical for simply believing in Palestinian self-determination and the right of the Palestinians to be free of this awful treatment that they're enduring.
Sure. I'd probably want to know more details about what the vetting process looks like and what happens to these people when they're brought in the. Are they sent back after the medical treatment is received? Is their movement restricted and monitored? These could be things that are I don't know until this this program came under scrutiny. That might make me more willing to support it. I would not. I'm not writing off the government's sincere interest in making sure we don't have not just people who are pro-Palestinian or pro-Gazan or anti-Israel. I don't care about that, but people who are genuinely, because of their circumstances or maybe sincerely, have terrorist affiliations for being here.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that there should be, and I believe there are, security checks already in place. My impression is, or my understanding is, that these are non-immigrant visas, so they are by their nature temporary, but if people know otherwise, by all means, correct that.
All right, next up, Beto O'Rourke is in hot water this week after his PAC sent at least $1 million to Texas Democrats who fled the state. That and more are coming up. Don't go anywhere. Former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke is in hot water after a judge expanded a restraining order that would prevent both him and his political group from sending money out of the state.
That order, coming after O'Rourke's organization, Powered by the People, spent much of the last 2 weeks fundraising for state Democratic lawmakers who fled the state amid the redistricting battle in the legislature. O'Rourke said Saturday that his PAC gave more than $1 million to Texas Democrats during the previous special session, a move that Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton alleged was bribery, and he claimed that O'Rourke's PAC was misleading donors.
That complaint prompted a Texas judge last week to grant a temporary restraining order against the PAC, and a separate judge later agreed over the weekend. The judge expanded the restraining order and wrote in her decision that the PAC's fundraising constitutes false, misleading, or deceptive acts under Texas law because, quote, defendants are raising and utilizing political contributions from Texas consumers to pay for the personal expenses of Texas legislators.
The order also barred third-party fundraising platforms like ActBlue from transferring money outside the state from O'Rourke's PAC. Meantime, the Texas state legislature gavelled in a new special session on Friday. Texas Democrats are expected to return to the state soon.
Live by campaign finance law, die by campaign finance law. Niall, you know that I frankly don't really care about these various restrictions on spending, and this is actually a good example of why, because the rules are very technical and kind of arbitrary to me and can always be enforced more stringently or less stringently. I'm sure these judges are reaching decisions that are perfectly in keeping with the law, but also could be applied more loosely if they were more favorable to Beto O'Rourke, or more strict, or whatever. And this is the danger you get into. But I don't care if he raises money for their defense. It's fine.
I expected you would be more gleeful about a Beto O'Rourke defeat in the courts, but not so, actually.
No, I'm taking the high road of principle. Good. This shows why excessively regulating money raising is, in my view, it is speech. And if they want to raise money for this stunt, they should be allowed to do so.
Well, in this case, I think that the distinction that the judges, plural, are drawing, I'm not sure makes a lot of sense. I mean, they're arguing basically that O'Rourke's organization raises money for political purposes. And then they're arguing that that PAC paying for like hotel stays isn't a political purpose because it is a personal expenditure. But the reason the Texas Democrats are in those hotels is political, right? They've run away, essentially. So, I mean, is that not political spending? It seems to me that that is actually political spending.
And this is what you run into with like the Hatch Act, where it's can't use public resources for partisan political purposes, which sounds good, right? We don't want to do that. But then what's a campaign visit and what's not? What's part of your legitimate role? It's too messy to me.
The line in this case, at least, between political spending and non-political spending seems pretty fuzzy at best. In the spirit of your fairly bipartisan approach to this, I must say I'm not a huge fan of the tactic of simply running away to deprive a legislature of a quorum. That doesn't seem a very sensible way to conduct political business to me. It's like, we're going to go down to defeat in this vote, so let's just disappear.
Isn't it funny, the quirks of our system? I mean, the filibuster is the ultimate quirk, whereby it was written in such a way that you had to talk and talk and talk, and then they said, well, that's stupid. You can just say filibuster. Right. But they didn't intend for it to be a system where actually it takes 60 votes to pass anything in the Senate. It's very funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's just all these really weird and arcane laws, I think, are kind of complicated. But the deprivation of a quorum just seems like an obvious attempt to frustrate what the Democratic, with a small d, will is for good or for bad. So that's why I'm not a huge fan of that.
I find it amusing. It's like a Where's Waldo for the Texas Democrats. Find him in the little drawing.
They're coming back now, so we'll find them in the legislature.
Although I guess we know what hotels they're staying in, because if this
Beto has paid the bill.
Decision. Oh, the Hyatt, huh?
See if he's doing the luxury hotels or otherwise. In any event, up next, President Trump is ramping up the federal takeover of the District of Columbia. But is this really about crime? I'll talk about that next in my notes. Stick around.
All right, Niall, what's in your notes today?
Well, Robby, another day, another ramping up of Donald Trump's federal takeover of the District of Columbia. And another reason to worry about the dark road the nation is barreling along at a frightening pace. If you hadn't heard, there are a couple of new developments. First, 3 Republican-led states are sending National Guard troops to the Capitol at Trump's request. The deployments from South Carolina, West Virginia, and Ohio will roughly double the number of National Guard troops from their current 800 to almost 1,600. Secondly, and more importantly in many ways, those troops are preparing to carry weapons. That was first reported by the Wall Street Journal and confirmed by other outlets. This is a reversal of official statements from just last week. The Journal cited an Army statement from last Thursday, which had said that Guard members would not carry weapons and that those weapons would, quote, remain in the armory. Another Rubicon crossed, another guardrail vaulted over. As is often the case, Trump's transgressions, moving day by day and inch by inch away from vital norms in American society, need to be appreciated for what they are. Contrary to the protestations of the MAGA movement, the problem in relation to Trump is not overreaction from liberals, it's underreaction to the real dangers he poses to American democracy and pluralism and civil society. Here's what we had before last week. A president who has never accepted his loss in the 2020 election, still traffics in lies about it, and pardons those who violently sought to overturn it. A president who tries to put law firms out of business for representing his opponents. A president who has extorted a major broadcasting network because that network's corporate owners needed his approval for a merger. A president who constantly attacks judges as sick monsters and the like when they have the temerity to rule against him. And now what do we have? A president who puts armed vehicles on the National Mall, troops outside Union Station, and checkpoints on the streets. A president who in effect says, that promise that National Guard troops will be unarmed, never mind about that. As a reminder, there is no crime emergency in Washington. Violent crime is down 26% year on year, and that's on top of a 35% fall the previous year. Here's DC Mayor Muriel Bowser last week.
This year, crime isn't just down from 2023. It's also down from 2019, before the pandemic, and we're at a 30-year violent crime low.
But here's the crucial point. The fact that there is no need for Trump's actions doesn't mean there's no point to them. There's a very clear point, as an exercise in raw power and as a conscious and sinister lowering of the bar for troops to be deployed on the streets against American citizens. Because if troop deployments can be justified here and now on the basis of presidential whim and a non-existent so-called emergency, they can be justified for other reasons in other places. Trump himself has said as much. Here he is at the White House 1 week ago today.
We have other cities that are very bad. New York has a problem. And then you have, of course, Baltimore and Oakland. We don't even mention that anymore. They're so far gone. We're not going to let it happen. We're not going to lose our cities over this. And this will go further. We're starting very strongly with D.C., and we're going to clean it up real quick, very quickly, as they say.
This will go further. Indeed, it will. As one ex-user who posted that clip put it, translation, DC gets the pilot episode of his police state. That should concern Americans way beyond the liberal left. Conservatism, or some branches of it at least, has traditionally warned of the dangers of the rights of the individual being trampled by an overbearing government, about the levers of the state being used to traduce the freedoms of the people. Is that philosophical tradition just to be abandoned, junked, because the power-hungry president in question wears a red hat and has an R after his name? Apparently so. The Conservative breakdown is so profound that a few years ago it was outraged by a nanny state where government sought to mandate, horror of horrors, more nutritious school lunches. And now it acquiesces in a daddy state where a vainglorious president puts soldiers on the street for no good reason. Some Democrats have at least sounded the alarm. Here's Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal on MSNBC a few days ago.
And so this is not at all about crime. Let's not be fooled about that. This is an authoritarian power grab. That is what it is. And Donald Trump is using all of the things that are supposed to be in benefit of the American people instead to cement his sole power over a number of very important parts of our democracy.
In a broader sense, the alarms about creeping authoritarianism are being sounded by people who know what they're talking about. Here's New York Times columnist M. Gazans, who lived and worked in Russia during part of Vladimir Putin's rule and ended up getting convicted in absentia on trumped-up charges.
If we find ourselves in a country where the first thing that comes to mind when we think about the president is, oh, but he's got all those people behind him, the military, the National Guard, police forces, this giant ICE force, then the very way that we think about the presidency is going to have changed.
We are in a country that is changing. It's changing fast, and I would argue it's changing darkly and for the worse. And not nearly enough people are shouting, stop. So I tried to couch that in terms that would appeal to your libertarian instincts, Robby. Because surely you must have at least some qualms about a president acting in this way because of the way it does infringe on basic liberties.
Certainly. I don't like spending a lot of money on any government service, be it excess policing or anything else. But where I come down on this, I agree that some corrective is necessary to Trump's language that crime is so out of control here. But crime has come down since 2023. That's a good thing. Still, the baseline rate of violence in D.C. is too high. It's the 11th most it's not the most violent city on earth. It's not a post-apocalyptic dystopia, but it's also not, I would say, an idyllic paradise where there's nothing wrong. It's the 11th most violent city in the country. It's the city where the federal government has more responsibility over its management. Some of the disorder in our city is on federal property that is supposed to be managed by the federal government. Now, is redirecting National Guard troops from other areas of the country to D.C. and having them have a presence around our monuments or in Georgetown a good use of those resources? I would argue probably not. What the city really, but I would say that the city needs more policing. Muriel Bowser's perspective herself is that we have hundreds fewer cops than we should have for our level of crime. These cops we need homicide detectives that are looking into where most of the violence is, which is in Anacostia, on the other side of the river. I don't know that that's where the National Guard's troops have been. We need a crime lab that can process ballistics evidence. We've had the evidence law lab offline. We need a criminal justice system that works. Prosecutors don't bring cases because they know they're not going to be able to get evidence and the cases aren't going to go anywhere. So I would still say there's a lot wrong. And I don't want to, I think the American people don't believe, even I think many of the people who live in D.C. don't believe you when you say it's all, not that you're saying it's all fine. I know you aren't saying that, but there is some danger in this city that's not just a vibe.
Yeah, but it's, if you say rightly that putting troops on the National Mall or whatever doesn't seem to be directed at crime, doesn't that then suggest that there is a different purpose for it? Either a performative purpose or a purpose that is simply about displaying presidential power. I mean, you mentioned 11th most dangerous city in the country. You wouldn't want federal troops put in the other 10 cities, presumably, or would
No, but D.C. is partly managed by the federal government, and so there seems to be a greater justification for it here versus other places. And then it would depend what they were doing. I think if there's widespread rioting and looting going on in some city, then it would be all right to send in the troops.
Right, but there's not here. This is the point, right? There's no emergency here.
Yes, but here is already under the federal purview, so it makes some sense. Depending on what they're doing, I don't know what they're doing is going to be tailored to our crime problem, but we've had an issue of gangs of young people attacking in broad daylight all over the city. It is happening. It happened to an ex-Doge staffer, which is, the actual motivation. Like, that was a real incident. I know one-off incidents shouldn't reflect our entire policies, but it's whatever it takes, I would like to bring crime in this city down. And I don't want to assemble some kind of fascist army for the president, but I don't know that that's what's going on.
I was going to say, whatever it takes is a very dangerous thing to get into. In any event, the leaders of several European allies are coming to Washington today, some say to babysit the discussions between Presidents Trump and Zelensky. What the administration had to say about that is coming up. Stay with us.
Leaders from Britain, France, and Germany, and Italy and Finland are all set to meet with President Trump today, along with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. It comes just days after Trump's historic summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday, where they did discuss a peace deal in Ukraine, a meeting from which Zelensky was notably absent.
Those European leaders announcing that they would be attending the meeting alongside Zelensky in an apparent move to present a united front, and to avoid another confrontation between Trump and Zelensky, like the now infamous February Oval Office encounter. The Associated Press, quoting the former head of France's military mission at the UN, saying, "The Europeans are very afraid of the Oval Office scene being repeated, and so they want to support Mr. Zelensky to the hilt. It's a power struggle and a position of strength that might work with Trump." But Secretary of State Marco Rubio pushed back hard on the idea that Zelensky needed backup to avoid being bullied by Trump. Let's take a listen.
There is concern from the Europeans that President Zelensky is going to be bullied into signing something away. That's why you have these European leaders coming as backup tomorrow. Can you
No, it isn't. That's not why they're coming
them?
as back. That's not true. This is such a stupid media narrative that they're coming here tomorrow because Trump is going to bully Zelensky into a bad deal. We've been working with these people for weeks on this stuff. They're coming here tomorrow because they chose to come here tomorrow. We invited them to come.
President Trump is already putting some pressure on Zelensky, making it clear the ball is in his court. He wrote in a post on True Social Sunday, President Zelensky of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to, or he can continue to fight. Remember how it started? No getting back Obama given Crimea 12 years ago without a shot being fired. No going into NATO by Ukraine. I don't know if it's bullying Zelensky to say he hopes he comes to an agreement. I don't know.
Perhaps not bullying, although Trump certainly holds, to use his preferred metaphor, a lot of cards here in the sense that Ukraine is obviously dependent on American aid continuing. Right. Yes, there's been some move to try to sort of funnel that through the European allies.
In the same way that I wouldn't have said that Trump was bullying Putin when he was frustrated with him and said he's got however many days or we're going to sanction. Like it's diplomacy. We're negotiating a complicated political situation. We're bringing European allies in for it. I think that's good. I don't have any. Some on the right hate Zelensky. I don't hate Zelensky at all. He's doing the best he can for his country. He's done a lot of things in the course of prosecuting this war that I disagree with in terms of the domestic politics of the country, suspension of rival political parties and independent media that I think is illiberal and bad. I think it was. I don't care that he doesn't wear a suit when he comes to the Oval Office.
Such a weird focus.
And even their infamous Oval Office meltdown. I don't know. I kind of like seeing my leaders argue or debate in public rather than behind closed doors for a change. Is fine. It's all fine to me. And I hope it's coming toward peace.
So I think the not wearing a suit is fine. I have no objection to that. I had a much stronger reaction, it sounds like, to the February meeting than you did. Not because I dislike seeing people debate in public. I'm all in favor of that. I just felt that A, Zelensky was ambushed, in my view, particularly by J.D. Vance more so than Trump. And then second of all, I felt that the whole framing of the debate was just inaccurate and unfair. I mean, the framing of the debate was that somehow Zelensky was the one who was digging his heels in and frustrating a conclusion to a war that was begun by his country being invaded. Like, that's the fundamental reality. Yes, we can talk about NATO expansionism. We can talk about whether the US broke promises in the past. But the catalyst for the war is that Putin sent his army into Zelensky's country.
Of course. But my sense is that at that point, Zelensky's conviction that he can't agree to any territorial concessions was stronger then than it is now. Now I think he's in much more the realm of reality, and that's good. And I'm fine with them holding out. Again, if there's no security guarantee for Ukraine, what's the point of them making a deal? That would clearly, to me, signal Russia just intends to go forward with the conquest. One way or the other, we're all being played. We should then just not engage at all. So the security agreement is very important if that's part of it. And then if it is, I think let's get this done so we can get Donald Trump his Nobel Peace Prize that he deserves.
Over my dead body, Robby. Donald Trump is going to get the
first
Nobel Peace Prize.
Azerbaijan and Armenia, now this. I joked about this with Lindsay. She just loved this. You'll love this just as much. We need to create a even bigger peace award to give to Donald Trump, because the Nobel Peace Prize is already sullied by Barack Obama having gotten it for doing nothing.
Lord. So, giving the world hope of a new order.
God. That was a participation trophy. They turned it into a participation trophy.
It was setting a new tone after all the bitterness of the Iraq War.
Well, even you must concede that was a little bit premature in terms of what Barack Obama actually accomplished.
I mean, I guess it was, but I think that Trump is.
They got swept up in the hopium.
I enjoyed the hopium, and I thought it was much better than what Trump is doing. But the point here is that Trump just seemingly wants a deal, not exactly at any cost, but he seems to care more about the achievement of a deal than any principle that is at stake here. And I've said, and we said in the earlier
that's
segment,
probably characteristic of foreign policy.
There's an important question at stake as to whether Putin is going to simply get away with invading a neighbor. And I'm less defeatist than you are about the overall situation, because you could, in fact, ramp up the economic cost on Russia. You could continue to aid Ukraine to the point where the attritional effect on Russia becomes greater. And therefore, I mean, up the motivation on Putin to make a deal. Putin has very little incentive to make a deal now because he's advancing on the battlefield, partly because the US has been dwindling away in terms of its level of backing for Ukraine.
I don't think they seem willing to stomach so many losses on the Russian side. Would increasing support to Ukrainian troops, if it's arms and aid, what more can they accomplish? There, at some point, they're going to be. My understanding is their even ability to just use arms that are given to them is going downhill pretty rapidly because they're running through the military age population. Now, if you're saying, certainly if troops were committed by a European country or by the U.S., then yes, I agree, then that would change the calculation in the battle.
And nobody wants to do that.
But we are not willing to do that.
Right.
Is Europe willing to do that? I don't think they are either. Right. At which point, I'm not sure. Yes, we could adjust the dial and cause more destruction to Russia in a short term, maybe an intermediate term, but I don't. So then tons more Ukrainians die. And what's the end result?
Well, tons more Ukrainians die,
and
or alternatively, Putin eventually thinks, well, look, I need to actually sue for peace as well here because the mutual costs of this are too severe.
I just don't see any evidence that he thinks that way. I think he says, no, so be it. We'll lose another 500,000 Russians or whatever.
But one of the things that is insulating him from domestic pressure is the fact that the economic consequences have not been sufficiently dire as to actually create that pressure or intensify that pressure on him.
I've become so, every time I hear someone, even people I think are credible, say, oh yes, this is unpopular and for various reasons, the regime could be threatened, could be toppled from within, that just always ends up being pie in the sky fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying the regime would be toppled, but I'm saying that you could change the dynamics and the calculus for Putin beyond just saying, well, we're going to choke off aid to Ukraine anyway, and then expect Putin to do a deal when his troops are advancing. If his troops are advancing, what incentive does he have to do a deal? Former FBI Director James Comey makes a stunning admission. We'll tell you more next. We'll be right back after this.
James Comey won't let bad blood shake him up. The former FBI director admitted he tunes into Taylor Swift to deal with President Donald Trump. The self-proclaimed Swiftie explained in a video on his Substack. Take a look.
At my second Taylor Swift concert in Hartford, Connecticut, 14 years ago this summer, she sang a song about this topic, asking, why you gotta be so mean? And she spoke directly to the nasty people. I bet you got pushed around. Somebody made you cold. But the cycle ends right now, because you can't lead me down that road.
Comey, who referred to the Republican Party as coarse and ugly, turned around and lightly denounced California Governor Gavin Newsom's recent meme mockery of Trump. Let's watch that.
Like a lot of you, I struggle with how to stand up to bullies without letting their meanness infect me and change me. You may have seen that the governor of California has been generating a lot of attention lately by posting on social media in a satirical way where he mocks Donald Trump and his all-caps megalomania and his absurdity. And I find it very funny, hilarious even sometimes. But I gotta be honest, it also leaves me with a strange feeling at times because I don't want us to become like Trump and his followers.
Conservatives have been slamming Comey since the video dropped on Sunday. Dinesh D'Souza posted, quote, after using his power for years to entrap Trump, Flynn, and others, he tries now to come across as a normal guy, a Taylor Swift fan, and a champion of civility and decorum. I'd love to see this sociopath locked up. Lock him up. I don't think he should be locked up except for cringe, which is just incredibly cringy videos. That was like that was anti-humor, and then it became humorous because it was so earnest and like boomer. It's cringe. There's no other word for it.
So first of all, I think I'm a much bigger Taylor Swift fan than you are.
Taylor Swift moderate.
Really?
I like her fine.
Okay.
I'm not a fanatic. I'm not a devotee. There's plenty of her music that I like just fine.
I think she's the outstanding songwriter of her generation. As regards James Comey, I read his comments before I saw the video, and I read the comments and thought, well, that seems fair enough, civility, and he cited the thing that she said on the recent podcast with the Kelsey brothers about treating your energy as if it's expensive, in other words, not giving your focus to people who are just annoying or haters
Okay,
or whatever.
so I'm a moderate on Taylor Swift's music, but I'm absurdly negative on any news related to Taylor Swift.
Okay.
I don't care.
Oh.
I don't care.
You weren't tuning in for the podcast?
Right, there was the Kelsey thing, and I was just like, I don't want to even know what is happening here. I don't care.
So I've seen the clips. I haven't watched the whole thing. But in any event, the Comey video didn't do him any favors because it's just James Comey standing there against a blank wall on video talking rather ponderously about Taylor
really
Swift.
Like attention to me.
Yeah, I mean, the thing...
You know what I'm saying?
Well, the thing that always strikes me about Comey is he seems to really enjoy talking about his agonies, about his past decisions, before concluding that all his past decisions were in fact correct.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so it's a somewhat self-referential thing where he goes through all of these motions and then decides that in fact he was right all along.
Almost crocodile tears that he's had to become such a high-profile figure. That I was just neutral, totally politically neutral, just good government employee, unfortunately thrust into this spotlight, and I'm so upset about it. I'm so unhappy about all this attention I got and all this worship from, well, first from one side and then from the other, and then hate from everyone. Crocodile tears.
Yeah, I mean,
likes it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, for the record, go with the various theories about how he deliberately tried to manipulate an election one way or another. I don't think he did that to Hillary. I don't think he did it to Trump. But I do get why he can irritate people at times. I mean, that sort of pontificating and that rather sanctimonious style he has does rub people up the wrong way. People should just listen to Taylor Swift on a podcast instead.
You're exactly right. That is perfectly how I feel about James Comey. I don't really care either thing that he did, but it's the sanctimony of it. What's your favorite Taylor Swift song? My favorite Taylor Swift song is "This Is Me Trying," actually, which is one of her sadder songs, but I think it's a very moving song. I do think her range is amazing, that she can write songs like that and then these like very classic pop songs like "Shake It Off" or whatever. So yeah, I like the anti-hero song. Yeah. That does it for us on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way today, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel so you never miss any of our content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. See you later.